All right. So this session is being recorded. You may have seen a notification to that effect, but that is because we do anticipate there may be a handful of folks who can't join us today. But for everyone who is here, welcome and thank you for being here. Today is our Special Education Indicator Review Support Day. And we decided to do this a little bit differently than we have in the past, where we kind of, last year we did this conference style and we hit everything live virtually all throughout the day. Today, you'll see we have a blend of live times that you can interact and hear directly from us, some recorded sessions that we will tell you about in a little bit, and then live interactive Q&A with us at the end of the day. But thank you for being here. I'm Janine Sansosti. I'm the Director of State Support Team Region 8. I will be one of your trainers today, along with Rachel Underkoffer, who is also here. And as I had said before, the rest of our special ed team is here with us as well. They are going to be the friendly faces who are helping you through this process. Rachel, you want to go ahead? Thank you so much. As we've said several times, we are collecting attendance information via the Google Doc that has been pasted in the chat. So we ask that you go ahead and click on that doc and let us know that you were here today. And that link has been pasted in the chat, and Tracy will keep doing that for the next few minutes or so. Next slide.
I'm so sorry. I can't get into the Zoom other than by phone. How do I?
Go ahead.
So I was sent a link with a passcode that I keep getting a notice that it's invalid.
I believe what's happening is that the passcode should be indicator with a lowercase I, and there was a typo in the original invitation. So if you try it one more time, make sure that it's indicator with a lowercase I and with no spaces in it. And that should help. But you're welcome to stay by phone. We are recording this, so if you need to get off the phone, you can come back and watch the video later, but we'd love to have you join us live if you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the slides that we have today, if one of my colleagues could paste those into the chat, you can follow along with them right now. And those slides, as you're used to from SST8, are full of links to various resources that will be helpful to you along the journey. So not only do we want you to have a recording of the video to refer back to or access if you couldn't join us live, but the slides themselves are actually a pretty useful resource. So that should be coming into the chat in just a minute, or you can just copy down this bit.ly that you see here, and that will take you to our slides. All right, so here's what we have planned for this hour. A lot. We have a lot to cover with you all. We are going to quickly touch on accessing your data just to make sure everyone knows how and how to gain access if you don't have it already. We will briefly touch on all of the indicators just to sort of understand the big picture. We are not going to go into any detail of the individual indicators because we have separate breakout sessions for that, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. We will spend some time on the required actions and timelines. Again, we'll go through that pretty quickly because you'll hear more information in your breakout videos on that. Where we really want to spend some time today is investigation of records, self-review summary report, and tips for completing the improvement plan. And that is because pretty much all of those things, even if you've done this last year, they have had some changes to the way that they're asking folks to do this, and they're the most susceptible to error. And so the places that we want to kind of make sure that we guide you. We'll end with making sure that you know who are your points of contact for all of the indicator sessions. And then we will have time during this session to answer your questions. We ask you to keep your questions general to kind of the forms and tools in the overall process. As I'll tell you about in just a minute, we will have indicator specific times for you to ask questions about disproportionality or surveys or things of that nature. I see the sign-in sheet was pasted in again. If I can get one of my teammates to paste the bit.ly for the slides into the chat, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Next slide, Rachel. Thank you. So as I had mentioned, we will have we already have recorded breakout videos that are just on specific indicators. So whatever finding brought you here today, there is a video that will tell you more. Thank you, Dee Dee. More about those specific indicators. They range anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, 30 minutes being disproportionality because there's a lot of different types of dispro and we crammed it all into one video. So you will have some time to access those videos today or on your own time. And we'll tell you a little bit more about how we envision that schedule playing out and where you can access those videos in just a minute. Next slide. Actually, we'll tell you right now because I forgot it was coming up. So our plan is from 10 to 2. So basically after this session to 2 o'clock today. Those are going to be on YouTube and they're going to stay on YouTube, but our goal is to try to have you check in with those videos and watch them during the 10 to 2 time, so that from 2 to 3:30 when we're available for questions, you've already had the chance to sort of hear everything about your indicator and get as up to speed as possible. The link to the YouTube channel, I'm just going to paste into the chat here, so that you have it. That should take you to where all of our videos are posted, but we will share that link again before the end of today's session. Again, just kind of going over the schedule. As we said, 9 to 10, we're going to go over the things that apply to everybody in this live overview session. 10 to 2 is time on your own to watch your videos. If you don't get a chance to watch your video today, because we know life is crazy in the districts and schools right now, we understand. Those videos will continue to be up for the entire indicator season. But from 2 to 3, we will be answering questions around disproportionality, really indicators 9, 10, and placement, as we didn't have any findings in indicator 4 this year. And then 2:30 to 3, we will be answering questions about indicators 11 and 12. So those more kind of compliancy, timeline-driven findings. And then from 3 to 3:30, Helen Brophy will be answering her sessions or her indicators questions for alternate assessment and post-secondary transition, indicator 13. The link that we are using for the Zoom right now and the passcode, it's exactly the same. So you should be able to go back to the same invitation, click on it, and it will take you to the Q&A session. Okay.
And one thing I just wanted to note, Janine, on here on this slide, the passcode for the word indicator is lowercase. So that's something that kind of threw some people off this morning, and on our slide, we need to change it. It should be a lowercase I at the beginning of indicator, just for this afternoon, if you go into any of the Q&As.
You are exactly right, Rachel. I actually just fixed it right now. It won't show up unless you reload the slides, but for other folks, when they log in, they will see it correctly in the bit.ly. Thank you for mentioning that. And just a quick note too, if you aren't able to make the Q&A sessions, we're going to again make sure that you know who your point of contact is for each indicator, so you can follow up with them individually if you can't make it this afternoon. We completely understand. Okay, Rachel, how can people access their data if they haven't already?
So before we get into a review of some of the indicators, we just want to make sure that everybody is able to access your special education profile. We're not going to go in depth in this process because a lot of people who are here today have been here in the past and are pretty familiar with accessing their special education profile. But if for some reason you are unable to access that, please put something in the chat box for us so that we can reach out to you after the session. Stay on the Zoom. We can walk you through it. We can give you some details or email you how to access it. So please just drop something in the chat box, your name, your email, your district, and we'll make sure that we connect with you so that you can access it. All right. So in order to access your special education profile, you need to log into the OHID portal. And so this used to be the SAFE account in the past, but it changed a couple of years ago to the OHID portal. And so you will find your special education profile under the My App tab. Sorry, we've got lots of people still trying to enter the room. And so you can find it under the My Apps tab in your OHID portal. And so just an important reminder is that not everybody has access to be able to see your special education profile in your district. It's usually limited to superintendent, assistant superintendent, special education directors, coordinators, and curriculum directors. So if you need to get other people on your team and need to share some data or some information with them, you may need to get the information to them in another manner because they may not have access to it through their own account. All right, so this is coming straight from the indicator manual. This talks about how to access your special education profile. So like I said, you would log into the OHID portal, you go to My Apps and you would select special education profile. And then you will see right when it pops up, there will be a link that says 2021, 2022 profile, and it will have a nice little star yellow icon on it. And then once you click on that, on the right-hand side of the new screen that pops up, you will have something in red that says View 2021, 2022 profile. When you click on that, your profile should load, and you'll see next to all the indicators, green, red, or orange tabs, you will see some icons that have an exclamation point, and then you will see buttons, a blue button that will say a plus sign for more information. So if you see an icon that has an exclamation point, I would definitely expand that and make sure that you look to see if there's a required action under that tab. I know some people were having questions recently because they had some orange tabs that said TBD, to be determined, and they had an icon, but they weren't sure what it meant. Make sure you look at those icons very closely, because there may be a parent survey that you're doing this year. There may be some other type of survey that you're doing, or some other kind of required action. So just something to keep in mind.
Hey, Rachel, I'm going to jump in for just a minute. You're doing a fabulous job. But our colleagues have let me know that we have kind of a higher number than usual of folks participating by phone. And we suspect that that's because you might be running into some passcode issues. So if you're not able to be quite in front of your email, you might not have known this, but the issue is that the passcode is indicator with a lowercase I. And they're unthankfully, Outlook tried to autocorrect and put a capital where it didn't belong. So if you are copying from an old version of the invite, you might be putting the password incorrectly. But if you're just on the phone because you're on the phone and that's where you need to be today, that is a-okay. We just wanted to make sure that people weren't locked out of the visual part of this. So passcode is indicator with a lowercase I. Okay, I'm all done, Rachel. Continue. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. I saw lots of people coming in via phone, so I'm glad you had mentioned that, Janine. So this is just a quick slide. How do I know if I have a required action? Kind of like I was just saying, next to your indicators, you'll have a green tab that says met with a nice little star next to it. You'll have a red tab that says not met with an exclamation point. You need to expand that for more information to see if you have required actions that are due. And then you might see an orange tab that says TBD, to be determined, and then you might see an icon next to it. So still expand those tabs just to check and make sure that there's nothing that you need to be doing, or there's something maybe later in the spring that you will be doing. So another thing that comes straight from the indicator manual is accessing the monitoring and tracking system. So like I said, there are only certain people in the district that have access to this. And so you may need to make sure and check with other people to see if you need to give them more information. And this is under, again, the My Apps tab in the OHID portal. And so this is where you will be submitting some of your documents, such as your self-review summary report and your improvement plan in April. So this is a really important tab to already have ready to go in your portal. And then also later on in September, you will be submitting your evidence of your completion of activities to this area as well. On this slide, we talk a little bit about accessing the ODE secure upload site. Like I said, some things will go through the monitoring and tracking system, and then some things will go to this ODE secure upload site. And so what you will use this site for is when you are uploading student documents. And Janine was nice enough to put a little link to the site on this slide here for you to make it a little bit easier to access. So for certain indicators, you will have an investigation of records. You'll need to submit student records to this site, and you will need to make sure that you fill out all the information, first name, last name, email address, purpose, upload your files for the students, and then afterwards you will receive an email confirming the uploads. So you will also need to submit the student record submission form, which is available in your special education profile to download. And so you will need to fill out some information on that record submission form and submit that separately somewhere else. And then you will submit your records here. We are going to go into this in much more extensive detail in our YouTube playlist sessions that we have uploaded for you on our SST8 YouTube channel. Each indicator goes into more detail about specifically how you will upload and go into all of these different sites and portals. And then it's also extremely detailed in the manual as well. All right, and now, unless there's anything else, Janine, that you wanted to add, I'm going to turn things over to you for a little bit.
That was spectacular, Rachel, and thank you for your understanding as I interrupted you. Just want to make sure folks are connected. Most folks have heard us talk about this, but we like to just put the indicators in context briefly, just so you have an understanding of sort of why is this all happening? Where did this come from? Why are there numbers? What is this about? So let's take a minute to just review those indicators. The special education profiles are created annually for each district and community school. The profiles give us an information about performance, not only within the last year, but also over time on key indicators that measure both our services to students with disabilities and their critical outcomes. These are indicators that the Federal Office for Special Education Programs requires every state to monitor for all of their LEAs. In Ohio, these profiles, the way they come through, not only share data, but they also show required actions for when compliance indicators have been missed and when there's corrective action needed. So it will not only tell you your results, your trends over time, but it will tell you exactly what you need to do and give you the resources to do it, which is a very nice feature of the profile. And so as we think about this, the special ed profile sometimes is thought about as almost like a progress report for the district. It shows how the district is progressing over time, where they are off the mark in some places, and what they need to do to get back on track. The special ed rating, which also comes out once a year, is a little bit more definitive. It sort of says, here's your rating, here's how you did. That's like your special ed report card. And the two are obviously very linked. So what you see in the progress report is very often showing up in the rating, but we try to make that analogy just to help folks understand why you get two. One is very off track and what do you need to do about it? And the other is, okay, so here's how it ended up looking at the end of the year. Next slide. As with last year, and we believe this will be the trend for the time to come, there will be a two-phase profile release. So once upon a time, all of your indicators flowed at the same time. But now they're going to come out in two phases. So phase one covers student outcomes, procedural compliance, disproportionality, and required annual surveys. Basically everything that requires you to do something if you're not where you need to be. So phase one came out in December of 2021. We did cross out indicator 3C here because historically indicator 3C would be one of those action-oriented compliance indicators. It's talking about achievement for students with disabilities, but if the data is far enough below the threshold, there is required action. However, because of the pandemic and some of the waivers on state assessment and safe harbors for decision-making and accountability, there is not any required action for indicator 3C this year. So you will get your data for that, but you will get it in phase two. Phase two is all the other data that just sort of helps us understand how our students with disabilities are faring in our LEAs. So that phase two data release is expected for April of 2022. And again, there are no required actions for that second set of data. But we do really strongly encourage you all to make sure when that data comes out to go back as a team and look at that data, because it can be very informative for planning future special education programming, curriculum and assessment and instruction and whatnot in the district. All right, next slide. The other thing that's helpful to remember is that there are actually a total of 20 indicators, or it goes up to indicator 20. I don't know that there's like a 16, 17, 18, but there's an indicator 20. There's a lot of indicators that are required by the federal government, and that the Ohio Department of Education quite a while ago thought to organize them around guiding questions. And these guiding questions are the questions that we are asking ourselves all the time, especially as we're conducting needs assessments and strategic planning within our LEAs. So it's helpful to just sort of see where these data points connect to our bigger concerns for students with disabilities. So you can see that the overall questions are young children with disabilities entering kindergarten ready to learn? That's looking at preschool data. Are children with disabilities achieving at high levels? Are youth with disabilities prepared for life, work, and post-secondary ed? And then getting into some of the compliance pieces. Does the district implement IDEA to improve services and results for children with disabilities? And then most recently, when the disproportionality indicators were added, they added a question asking, are children receiving equitable services and supports? So that's our newest question, but it's kind of helpful to see the big picture, how this fits into our goals for serving students with disabilities. Okay. Just again, to let you know, so many indicators, so many people here to help you. So our special education team at State Support Team Region 8, we refer to ourselves as a TBT, like you may have TBTs, we're a topic-based team. We have kind of divided and conquered who will be around to support what. So you can see, I'm not going to read them all, but you can see which consultants are assigned to support which indicators. And for the most part, it's the folks you've already been working with if you've had this finding before, with the exception of Rachel, who joined our team this year, and we're super happy to have her. And I just dragged her right over into the Dispro stuff because she's a school psych by background and interested in that stuff, and because the boss told her to do it. So we're happy to have her there. So these are the folks who did the videos that are in the breakout. These are the folks who will be answering questions for you from 2 to 3:30 this afternoon. And these are definitely the folks you want to contact if you get stuck or have questions in any way. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rachel to talk a little bit about timelines and required actions.
Absolutely. So we are just going to go over this briefly just because this is all in our YouTube videos that we made as well. But we just wanted to really hit the highlights real quick for you in this overview session today. But first, I want to talk through a little bit about the indicator review manual. So the indicator review manual is about 55 pages long when it's comprehensive and contains everything. And so what they did this year is ODE kind of changed it up a little bit in the state. And so they sectioned the manual out depending on indicator, and they linked your specific indicator manual, that section, based on your finding in your special education profile. It's a little hard to find, so we talk about that a little bit in our videos as well. So if you have a finding in, say, indicator 11, timely initial evals, when you expand the required action tab and you scroll down, you will see that they have linked for you in your special education profile that specific indicator 11 manual for you, so that you have only 10 to 12 pages to look at in terms of required actions and procedures for uploading documents, rather than reading this 55-page manual. Now, we did go ahead and upload these into Google for you, and on this slide is a link for you to come back to. It's very important that you know that the indicator manuals are not posted on ODE right now on their website. So we strongly recommend that you download the manuals that you need to your local computer. That way that you are not having to continually go into the portal and find your special education profile and find the manual every single time you need to refer back to it. So Janine was kind enough to give you links right here on this slide. And if you need help finding it, just let us know in your special education profile. We can send you screenshots and things like that. So some commonly required actions based on the indicators. Just wanted to briefly go over this. Like I said, this is going to be in our YouTube videos much more extensively. There's data appeals. Sometimes this is necessary if there may have been an error in some of the data recorded. This would be initiated by the district. You would submit information to the state about the fact that you feel that you have a data error and that you shouldn't have a finding in that particular area. Investigation of records. This is where you would have a finding in which you would need to submit student documents to the state for them to look at, initial evaluations, reevaluations, disproportionality findings, and things like that. The self-review summary reports and the improvement plans kind of go hand in hand together. The SRSR, as we commonly call it, the self-review summary report, this is really something that helps the district team to explore their systems, identify and prioritize some areas of concern, and then establish some root causes for why you may have that finding. And then the improvement plan is kind of the second piece of that, which is where the district kind of outlines what is your plan to identify and address those areas that you've seen in the SRSR, and what are your activities that you're going to do with your district to prevent those findings in the future. And so that is something that we want to make sure, sorry, my phone rang, of course, when I'm speaking. We want to make sure that we help you through that improvement plan process and that SRSR process, and help you kind of outline what are you going to do for the state to address those areas. Individual corrections, not everybody may have to do this, but it's as necessary. For districts that have to do an investigation of records, you will also need to, if they find non-compliance with those records, you will need to identify some individual corrections at a later date in May. And then systemic improvement, this is more of a process for providing evidence that you have made changes within your district. You have implemented new processes, new procedures, you have implemented some new flow charts or trainings for your staff to show that you are making systemic improvement. And then for disproportionality findings, there is a redirection of funds. So there's a redirection of about 15% of IDEA Part B funding if you are flagged for disproportionality. And so we'll talk more about that in our video that Janine and I did on disproportionality. Now, here are some very important due dates for you guys to remember. January 7th, which was last week. This is something that if you had indicator 9 and 10 findings, you needed to submit records last Friday or submit a data appeal. So if you have not done that and you had an indicator 9 or 10 finding, please do that as soon as humanly possible. February 9th is record submissions for all other indicators, other data reporting errors, investigation of records, data appeals. April 1st is when the SRSR and the improvement plans are due. They are due at the same time on April 1st for all indicators. And so one thing I wanted to note here is that April 1st kind of falls for some districts that have spring break at the end of March going into early April. So you need to plan accordingly, because you do need to adhere to these due dates. So if you do have a spring break right around that time, it's also April Fool's Day, which I find funny and comical and ironic. Make sure that you get those records in maybe a little bit early. May 13th is when individual corrections are due. So through the investigation of records that are submitted on February 9th, the monitors will let you know if they found non-compliance and errors, and then they will tell you what corrections you need to make, and then you will need to submit those corrections by May 13th. Then September 30th, this is a due date in the fall, but it does come very quickly. It may seem far away now, but this is where you need to submit evidence that you have created some new procedures and processes or engaged in trainings in your district to prevent future findings and to show that you have addressed some of the errors that have been found in the non-compliance. So we just want to give you a brief shout out on some of those due dates that will be coming up. Okay, one thing that the state kind of did differently this year is that at the end of each section of the indicator manual, they created a new little summary of table for you of due dates for each indicator. So on the left-hand side, you will see the due dates for everything. In the middle column is what needs to be submitted. And if it's, a self-review summary report, an improvement plan, investigation of records, or evidence of activities completed, those are the due dates on the left-hand side. The middle is what you need to submit. The right-hand column is where you would submit that information. So like I said a little bit earlier, is that you have a monitoring system where you will upload some things through the OHID portal. You have some websites that you have a secure site that you need to upload some records. So there's a few different places and it can get kind of confusing and overwhelming. So really pay attention to this chart in your manual because it really helps streamline the process for you. All right, so just going to talk a little bit about the investigation of records, which several indicators will need to perform this year. And again, that'll be due by February 9th. The investigation of records process, what you will do is you will need to select 5 student records from the records for review. You'll get a little spreadsheet from ODE in your special education profile. And they will want you to send initial evaluations whenever possible. Reevaluations are okay, but they would prefer to see initials to be submitted to them. So you will select 5 of those records and submit them to the state. You will record the SSID for each student on the student record submission form. It's a very easy form to complete. You really just go down the line and number your records and then the SSID, and then just fill out a little bit of other information. And then you will compile all the student record items that are requested. So a lot of times it'll be the evaluation team report, it'll be the documentation of the student's race or ethnicity. They might ask for a school calendar, they might ask for IEP components, and that'll be all outlined for you under your required actions in your special education profile. And then you will label your student records accordingly based on the student record submission form. And then you will submit the student record submission form and the student records. So like I said, the student records will be submitted to that secure upload site. The student record submission form will kind of go somewhere else in the monitoring system. So you will need to make sure that you are submitting things in the right places. And we are here to help you out through that process because, like I said, it can be a little confusing if you haven't done it before. But they are trying to streamline it a little bit, and they've changed a few things this year. Janine was very kind and made a brief video for you that is on our YouTube channel about hints and tips for a successful document upload process. And so it's a very brief video. And a lot of these hints and tips came straight from the monitors who are going to be looking at your records that you submit. So they definitely gave us some information about what kind of bogs the system down a little bit, what hinders the process, what kind of issues they frequently run into with the uploads. And so if you watch this video, it's going to really help streamline what you should do and what you should look out for when you go to upload your documents. And so we also included a link to our YouTube channel here where you can find that video. Janine, did you want to talk about these due dates or did you want me to go over these?
You got this. Go for it, girl.
Okay. So for indicators 9 and 10, your investigation records was due last Friday. I hope everybody saw that and did that. It was a very quick turnaround. The special education profile was released December 16th. I know a lot of districts went on vacation for a holiday break the following day or on that following Monday. So I know that was a very, very quick turnaround for some of you. And I know some of you just came back January 6th. So if that was an issue for you and you did not get those records submitted last Friday, please do it as soon as possible. The other due date for indicators 13 and disproportionality for placement, investigation of records are due by February 9th. So you've got a couple of weeks to compile all those records, to look at your required actions, and to make sure you follow the appropriate process to get everything uploaded. So you've got a little bit of time, but as we know, January is already flying by. So try to get those in as soon as you can. The sooner you can get those in, the sooner you can get feedback, and the sooner the process can kind of keep going forward for you. All right, and I'm going to turn things over to Janine again, and she's going to talk about the self-review summary report.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so if you've been here with us before, you're familiar with the SRSR, the Self-Review Summary Report. If you're not, it's if you're new to this, it's a tool that's designed to help your team analyze district data and establish the root cause and be really clear about your prioritized needs. You can find this form within your special education profile in the section where it tells you all your required actions. There's a link right to it in there. And I want to just tell everybody right away that even if you've done this before and you pull it up and it looks familiar, they have made a lot of tweaks. I'm going to go over big picture changes to the form, but even the wording of some of the questions has been changed just based on feedback from the districts and state support teams. So just want to encourage everybody to take a close look and make sure you know what you're getting into before you get into this process. Okay, so this slide just kind of goes over the SRSR portion of this process. We just want to kind of tell you about the steps a little bit. The first step is that you're going to pull together a team. In our breakout videos, we give you some ideas based on your indicator of who that team should be comprised of. There are some required members in some of the indicators, so you'll want to pay attention to that. The guiding questions that are in the SRSR are intended to help the district review current policies, procedures, practices, internal monitoring systems. So the whole purpose of this is sort of to look within and try to figure out what's going on. We'll go over the form in a little bit, but they've changed it a bit to have a place where you reflect on your practices or enter data, a place where you sort of summarize all of that, and then another place where you determine the root cause. But what you'll do is first go through and answer all of the questions in kind of self-reflection mode. Then what you will do is you will ask yourself for each of those, okay, we have the data. Do we think this is an area of concern? And really what you're asking is this kind of part of why we have this finding? Is this a critical issue we need to address? If you identify it as a concern, meaning for that question and kind of everything that goes within it, yes, this is a concern for our LEA, then you will go a step further and you will conduct a root cause analysis. So it's not just, our multi-tiered system supports are a problem. What is the root cause? What is the actual problem underneath the problem that needs to be addressed? And then the final thing that you will do is priority rank each area of concern so that you're clear about what your mission is as a team. So you should not have a ton of priorities. You really want to keep this small, but if you have, say, 2 or 3 priorities, you want to be clear about which one's number 1, number 2, and maybe number 3. All right. So this is a snapshot or screenshot of the form, and you can see with some of the changes, one of them is adding a new section. The first one that we're going to talk about is a section that is just intended for people who have already had this finding. So if you had a disproportionality finding, even like indicator 11, things like that, I believe it's on the compliance indicators too. There's a question that basically asks you to reflect, what have you already been doing to work on this indicator? How is that going? And what do you need to continue to do? You do still have to answer the rest of the questions, but it is understood by ODE that you're already doing things. And so they want to kind of give you the opportunity to put that front and center. So that new reflection section is only applicable if you've had the finding that you're addressing right now within the last 3 years. If you didn't have that, you can just skip it. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another new section that has been added is for every LEA whose indicator requires an investigation of records. What ODE was finding was there was an investigation of records to determine whether the records were compliant or not. If they were not, there were corrective actions on the records. You need to fix this. The planning form was wrong, whatever. Your indicator 13 didn't meet all the required pieces. Okay. But then that was never showing up in the improvement plan as something to think about systemically. We've got some things going on with our records. What do we need to do about it? So to help build a bridge, they put a section on the investigation of records into the self-review summary report. Now, if you don't have any findings on those records, meaning they review them and they're all compliant, then you won't really have a lot to say here. But if you do, this is a place to reflect on where are we off base with some of our records and what are we going to do about that systemically. Next slide. Okay, so this next slide is really important for everyone who is familiar with this form. It's important for everyone who's going to complete this form, but especially people who did it before because it's different now. So what they're going to have you do is do this in kind of 3 steps. So Rachel, don't advance the slide. There you go. But can you just hit the button like an arrow key? There you go. Perfect. So the first thing when you fill out a question is called data gathering. And this is just ODE's way of saying, answer the question. So the question that's posed here, it's a little small, is what is the district's formal written process for intervention prior to evaluation for special education services? Answer the question and continue on, just answer the question factually. Can you click again, Rachel? The next section is the new section. Oh, you had it, go back one, whoops. There we go. This is the new section. This is where they want you to sort of interpret Like, okay, what's going on here? So if in data gathering, you're answering questions about intervention prior to evaluation, and data analysis sort of pull that all together into a summary statement that's sort of strengths and weaknesses or gaps that you've identified, things like that. You're not quite to the root cause yet, but they want you to sort of pull it together and make sense of it a little bit. So I'm going to use an ETR analogy that will be familiar to some of you. If you think about that part 1 page that we have folks fill out in an ETR, and we say that the summary of assessment results is like the what, just tell us the data, that's the data gathering section that we just went over. The data analysis section is like the so what. So I see Rachel going back, that's the what. Thanks, Rachel, you're a mind reader. Next one is the so what. You're just going to do high level interpretation and kind of bottom line it. And then this is a little different from the ETR analogy, but click one more time, Rachel. The next one is the root cause. This is only if your team determines, yeah, this is an area of concern. So you may go through all of this and you may say, actually, our intervention prior to evaluation is not contributing to our bigger problem. So we don't really need to go any further. Then you would leave this section alone because you've not prioritized it. But if you do prioritize it, this is where you need to say, you know, okay, in the data analysis, we identified a gap. What is the root cause of that? Maybe it's a communications issue. Maybe it's a lack of training, you know, whatever it is, you're going to do a root cause analysis to get under that. So I know this was a little bit lengthy, but there is potential for confusion in how to fill this form out. And we just wanted to make sure everyone sort of heard what each section is intended to represent. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so you've heard me mention root cause analysis a few times, and those of you who went through this process with us before know that root cause analysis can be kind of messy and tricky to figure out how to do, especially if you've got a really dynamic team working together. So we want to give a shout out to our colleagues at State Support Team Region 3, including our friend Stephanie Denham, who used to be here with us and is now up there. They had already pulled together a lot of great root cause analysis resources. Some we already had in Region 8, some we didn't. And they gave us their blessing to just sort of throw them in here. So I am not going to go over these in any kind of detail. They're pretty self-explanatory. But again, if you have the bit.ly for these slides, you have all of these resources. They're all linked within here. These are tools that you can use to guide your team through a root cause analysis process. And one thing that we did find is that teams who had a slightly more structured approach to this seemed to get through it a little bit more quickly than teams that kind of did a lot of talking and then sort of said, so what do we think is the root cause? So Rachel, if you just want to page through these really quickly. The first slide is just kind of how to think about root cause analysis. This next one here is just showing that there are a lot of different ways to go about conducting a root cause analysis. And if you kind of poke around at them, you'll start to get a sense of which may be too much for your team, which may be a good fit. They're not one size fits all. Next slide, Fishbone is a very popular one. It helps sort of tease out some of the root causes and show some visual relationships, how things connect to each other. So Fishbone has done a lot. Obviously, this is a picture of a fish, but here's what it looks like when you actually conduct the root cause. So you would start with your primary issue on the far right and then identify contributing factors and then go deeper within that. And again, the links there are intended to tell you how you would go about doing that. The next one is pretty familiar, and that's the 5 whys guide and template. So kind of stating a problem and then saying, why do we think this is happening? And then explore that. And then when we have an answer there, why do we think this is happening, and continuing to go further and further down. That's the one that we used last year with teams most regularly. And then this final tool we have found to be very helpful. This is not how to do a root cause. This is how to analyze whether you've done it well when you've landed on a root cause. So this is a checklist, and you're going to want to take a look at the criteria and ask yourself, did we land on something that addresses the cause and not just the symptoms? Does it get on the why and not the who? So we're not saying it's because these students, we're saying, what is it that we are doing with these students that might be to blame here, or to, you know, at root here. So the criteria and the corrections here are intended to kind of help you evaluate your root cause and determine whether you landed on something that's going to be helpful. So again, those root cause resources, root cause resources are there to guide your team. We last year worked with districts and community schools in varying ways, depending on what was comfortable or what capacities the team already had. So in some cases, teams are kind of taking this and leading it, and we're just sort of here if you need us. In other cases, we were co-leading. So when you get to the point of sitting down and thinking about how are we going to do the SRSR, we want you to know what the options are. And then if that's something you're going to be pulling us in on, then we can kind of talk about how to facilitate that together or how to help you with it. As you can see here, for both the SRSR and the improvement plan, the due date is April 1st. Not joking. Good call, Rachel. That is a bizarre due date. Okay. A couple more tips on how to complete the improvement plan. This is something that this indicator session that we've been doing for years has always come back to. Before I address that, I do just want to echo what Helen just shared in the chat, which is that if you have only a finding for indicators 8, the family survey, or indicator 14, the longitudinal transition survey, you do not have to do a self-review summary report. You do not have to do an improvement plan. So thank you for that clarification, Helen. All right, so let's talk about how to do this improvement plan, because again, best of intentions, sometimes these forms are very confusing when they come out. The first really good news to share, and this is not going to sound like good news, but it is we're not using Smartsheets this year. So if you've been around for a while, you know that when we come to the indicator session time, we would take our guidance for how to fill out these forms and we would embed it into the form itself and say, here's one for the general improvement plan with all of our tips and tricks. Here's one for indicator 11. Here's one for indicator 12. Well, we've stopped doing that, and you'll see why in a minute. ODE is starting to embed that guidance right into their own plan. They stole the idea from us, not really, but it's getting to the point where the Smartsheets aren't really necessary. So don't be looking for them and don't use last year's. They will not be accurate. Okay. You should know that there are 4 different improvement plan forms, which is a change from last year. There's a version of the form that is specific to alternate assessment, so indicator 3B. There is one that is specific to disproportionality of any type. And then there's one, oops, I'm sorry, there's a missing parentheses there. One for compliance, indicators 11, 12, and 13. And then there's one for indicator 14. Now, let me be clear, because I just said you don't have an improvement plan to do for indicator 14. This is if you don't do what you're supposed to do for indicator 14. As far as I'm aware, no one is in that status. So as long as you put the surveys out into the world, you know, get them, like do everything that's on your to-do list, you're fine. It's only if you fail to do that, then you have to do an improvement plan. So I realize that could be a little confusing. So those are the 4 types of plans. The type that you need is linked right in your special ed profile. So you should not need to go hunting around for it. As I mentioned, all the improvement plans have changed this year, and some of them, like across all of them, here's some things that have changed. The first one is really a clarification. There is a summary section at the very top of all of them. And it was kind of a little confusing what ODE is looking for. So they've clarified that they really want you to summarize your self-review summary report. So at the top of your improvement plan, you are lifting out what were the priorities and the root causes that rose to the top. That's what your summary is supposed to be, because the self-review summary report should be the foundation for your improvement plan. The next one is similar to what we just talked about in the self-review summary report, and that is that there is a place for reflection. So if you have already been on this journey, you've already been implementing an improvement plan, you have an opportunity to reflect upon what have you already been doing and how's it going so far. And then the next one, and probably the most substantial, has to do, and Rachel, can you click again? Thank you. Actually, one more time. There you go. Short-term and long-term goals. So let me explain why. Again, for those of you who went through this process last year, we all had kind of some cognitive dissonance because some of these indicators are very significant systemic issues like disproportionality or significant underachievement of students with disabilities. And it takes a long time to make meaningful change. And yet your plan was due, I think it was due in May last year. And then your evidence of improvement was due in September. And so many people said to us, what do you expect us to meaningfully accomplish by September? And ODE's answer to that was basically, we have to close this out by September. So show us where you're at, set some goals, show us what you've accomplished, but we know the work is going to go on. So they modified the form now so that you can show our short-term goals or what we're going to do by September 30th and our long-term goals. And it says here, long-term is like major changes resulting in elimination of significant dispro, but that would be true for any of them. So what are you going to do in the long term to make sure you don't continue to have this finding? And hopefully that will make your plan feel more representative of the real work you're doing. You're not just going to fill it with little things you can do by September. You're going to fill it with things you're doing now and in the long term. Hopefully that makes sense. Some additional plans really quickly. There are some required activities that are stated right in your profile, especially, I don't think anyone has this finding, but indicator 4, there's like a video you have to watch. And it was never on the improvement plan. And so if there are required things that you have to do in the profile, ODE is putting them in the plan for you, just basically to give you credit for the things that you're already doing. You are doing a lot of things as a part of the required steps that are in fact improvement strategies. So those are preloaded into the plan. You can obviously, and you very much should, add your own activities. So don't think you just have to do what ODE says, but they're just trying to give you credit for the things they've asked you to do. Just real quick, SST notes is just a place for us to comment on your plan. But I will tell you, we've talked among our team, and our plan is to give you feedback internally. We're not going to wait until that you submit the plan to tell you what we think of your plan. If you guys send it to us early, we will review it. We will give you feedback, kind of get you on the right course if you're off a little bit. So we don't plan on using those SST notes a lot unless we haven't been able to get in touch with anybody. But we just wanted you to know that they're there. And then finally, there are some additional changes for Dispro that have to do with funding. So please, please, please go watch that video on disproportionality, and we go into great depth. The link is right there, as Rachel is showing. Go into great depth on what you need to know about how to fill that out with respect to redirection of funds. Okay, again, the due date for both your self-review summary report and your improvement plan is the same day. It's April 1st. So definitely do not plan on doing those things all at once. You're going to need to do self-review summary report and maybe in a couple sittings first, and then your improvement plan. So you want to backwards design. How are you going to get there by April 1st? Whew. Okay, that was a lot, but that was the big meat of it. We're getting close to the end. So I'm going to hand it back to Rachel. And actually, we said staff contact information, but I think it got scooted up to the beginning.
So one thing just to remember is that SSTA consultants must be involved in and help you with your self-review summary report and sign off on it, as well as your improvement plan. So you will need to contact your assigned SST consultant here at Region 8, and you will need to schedule time with them to, usually it's about 90 minutes or so, and sometimes you need more than one session, to go over your self-review summary report and your improvement plan. Now, if you watch all of our videos that are on YouTube, the YouTube channel, each indicator, the consultant added in their availability in their calendars that's already established and set aside of different dates that they are available for you to work with them on the SRSR and the improvement plan. So if you have an indicator 11 finding, if you have an indicator 9 finding, please watch the video on our YouTube channel playlist and look at the availability that your consultant has created and put in there, and then email them. Here are our emails, and then go ahead and reserve that time with them. We blocked it out on our calendar, so what you see on our YouTube videos is what we have currently available. So please make sure you reach out to these individuals, like we said earlier in the presentation, that we have different people who work on different indicators. So we had another slide previously, a little bit earlier, that outlined that, but just go to the YouTube channel playlist, watch the video, and towards the end of the video is the availability, and again, the contact information for each person. Janine, do you want to talk about this?
Absolutely, yeah. So let me tell you briefly kind of where we're all going with questions and answers for the entire day, but then we do have a little bit of time if folks have general questions about the stuff we just covered right now. We can tackle that. But first, as you can see, again, just showing our schedule for the day. And now you get a nice big check mark for having sat through the overview session. Now is the time to go watch those breakout videos that Rachel mentioned. And then we will do indicator specific Q&A from 2 to 3:30 in the time slots that you see here. Just a reminder, again, we're going to tweak the link or the passcode there so that it does reflect that lowercase I. Another thing I wanted to share, I shared this with somebody via email. If you are trying to log in via a web browser and you're continuing to not get in, what might happen is that you need to refresh it. So it keeps trying to pull up the same thing that you just typed. And so, you think you've put it in there and it's wrong and it keeps doing it. Just completely refresh and then type in indicator with lowercase, no spaces. And that does seem to help some folks. So anyway, so this is our timing for the specific, yes, Kristen just said she had to clear her cache. Perfect. Yeah, clear your browsing history, whatever. It just gets stuck in there sometimes if you're not using the Zoom app. So that's what's going on for indicator specific questions today. Next slide. In just a minute, we are going to direct you to go ahead and watch those videos that are on our YouTube playlist. On our SST at YouTube channel, there is a playlist specifically for Special Ed Indicators 2022, and they're all loaded up in there. If one of my colleagues wouldn't mind pasting that into the chat while I kind of keep wrapping this up, I would greatly appreciate it. The next slide just says that the biggest room, and actually, I'm trying to read the slide, it's blocked by my chat. The biggest room in the world is the can't talk. The biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. The improvement right now needs to be on my articulation. But we only say this just to remind everybody that we know this has been an incredibly challenging year, and here we are now, like more things to do, stressful timelines. But just trying to remember what our actual mission is here to improve service delivery and outcomes for students with disabilities. And this is another opportunity to really dig in and do that. And so we're just grateful to all of you for all of the effort that you put into this to make this an opportunity that turns out to be truly meaningful and productive for your LEAs.